Mr. Speaker.
Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Na mihinui kia koutou kia ora. We've seen some gripping television on our screens this week, Mr. Speaker. We've seen the Kohorangano credit card scandal. Tonight and on Twitter, we're going to see it about the member banks. Now we've seen the judgment from the District Court. We're going to see this government questioned, because this government is hanging by a thread on the single vote of this member, who we now know, resulting from a District Court judgment, as off to court to make his case. Mr. Speaker, but on Monday night is the television, the gripping television and the trending Twitter that I want to refer to. On Monday night we saw a minister out of his depth. We saw live on Campbell Live a minister have his own uncontrolled blowout live on television. And Mr. Speaker, Kiwis around the country, particularly in the regions affected by deep sea drilling like the Kaikoura region, are questioning, if this minister can't control himself on television, how's he going to control a well blowout 2.7 kilometres down off the Kaikoura coast? How's the minister to control that? And the fact is, the minister, he can't even point to a single person in Kaikoura, can't point to a single person who supports the government's drill it, mine it, frack it agenda, the agenda to put at risk our environment. In fact, we've got a minister who thinks his job is to go on television and defend the reputation of Anadarko, not defend the beaches, the economy and the climate of New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, for an agenda the government says is so popular, it's intriguing that Minister Amy Adams has proposed to make the exploratory stage, the riskiest phase, the stage we saw release 600,000 tonnes of oil into the Gulf of Mexico environment, the riskiest stage, a non-notified activity. Now, if this government wants to stand by everything it's doing for the oil industry, and there's an awful lot, because this government's all about cosy deals for their mates, if this government is so proud of their agenda, why are they blocking out the public from getting a say whatsoever? What we saw last week, however, was some more advice the government should be taking. We saw the OECD Secretary General, Mr. Angel Gurria, call for no new fossil fuel emissions by 2050. It's inconsistent for this government to be going out there in the deep waters off the Kaikoura and Canterbury and Taranaki coasts to be looking for new oil when the OECD is saying we need no new emissions. We saw the week before the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released the most authoritative scientific update on climate change. What we know from that report is there's more CO2, more methane, more net nitrous oxide than at any time in the last 800,000 years, probably much longer. What we know from the world's top scientists is climate change is happening. It's happening because of us. It's happening faster and worse than feared in previous reports, and it's going to have huge costs, huge social costs, huge costs on communities, on people, huge costs for the economy. We also saw a report out from the International Energy Agency. What we see the EIEA call for is that we cannot burn 70% of all the oil known about in the world if we want to achieve the government's own target of avoiding 2 degrees warming this century. Mr. Speaker, the IEA is saying we can't burn 70% of the oil we've already discovered, let alone this government going off and trying to find some more deep in the waters off the Kaikoura coast. But this government is all about deals for the oil industry. What we've seen is this government provide $46 million in tax breaks in the last financial year. We see the government constantly changing legislation to support the industry. We see this government literally calling out the Navy when iwi protesters get in their way. We see the government taking away the public's say. We see this government's job to act as cheerleader-in-chief for the oil industry, going on telly and defending Anadarko's reputation. And then it's incredible that Simon Bridges would go on TV and say, well, you're being unfair and biased if you don't have anything positive to say about the worst ever oil spill in the world's history. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure Phil Heatley was sitting at home watching Minister Bridges on TV on Monday night with his palm over his face wondering, what is this minister doing? This young guy is absolutely out of his depth when it comes to oil. The fact is, though, Mr. Speaker, we've seen a consistent pro-oil drilling agenda from this government. Now, the better idea, of course, is to listen to the OECD, no new fossil fuel emissions, to listen to the IEA, keep the oil into the ground, listen to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and act to protect our climate. And this is where the jobs and prosperity are going to come from, Mr New Zealand. A richer New Zealand's not going to come from hoping someone finds something in the bottom of the water and doesn't leave too much of a mess. The prosperity is going to come from a smart green economy.
Moana Mackie.